Hello everybody and welcome to another Crazy Fluid Art video. But before we get into the beauty that is this creation, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respect to their elders past and present and extend all that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. It is my absolute privilege to be able to create my art on the land that they once owned. So this video is the creation of this absolutely stunning Lazy Susan. It is without a doubt one of my favourite creations to date, and it's just a bonus that it's on a Lazy Susan. I came home from the Chalet Art Live in Brisbane with more confidence to try techniques that I'm not very good at. And so I came home and I actually tried to do a swipe, just a standard swipe, round swipe on this Lazy Susan, and it didn't work. I wasn't happy with it, but I wasn't going to give up. So I just kept playing and playing with it, and this is the creation. So I'm going to take you through that. And I hope you like it. I hope you learn lots, and I hope it gives you the confidence to go and try it yourself. All right, so I had to edit a bit of this because I did a lot of fluffing around at the start. But you can see I've got my Lazy Susan here. What you don't see on the back is I've actually taped the back up so that the back will stay nice and clean. So I'm now just throwing on my white pillow paint. I do a lot of fluffing, and I don't know why. I wasn't really organised when I was painting this. I didn't really have much of an idea in my mind. I had some paints left over from Brisbane and I just wanted to use them. I hadn't used abalone a lot until I went to Brisbane, so I wanted to play with some abalone. That's this little pigment. So I really wasn't that organised, but I was desperate to try a normal swipe, and that's what this was all about. It was supposed to be me doing a nice little swipe that would just spread out nicely and look beautiful. It didn't. And that's where this comes into it. So I'm just getting my pillow sorted. So the important part about a pillow is you need a pillow because you need something for your paint to glide on and something to move your paint around. If you just do your swipe straight on the board, there's nothing for that to move. So we pop a pillow down. You don't want it to be too thick, but you want it to be thick enough or so that it flows. So we're just going to spread this out. Honestly, this is the worst application of a pillow paint that there is. But I think what I was initially thinking I was going to do was just have my pillow in the center like this, so that when I spun the Lazy Susan, it would just flow out, because that's what a swipe would have done if I had done the swipe correctly to start with. I just struggle a lot with my swipes to apply the right pressure. So now I'm just popping my main pillow in, just popping my main pillow in the center and just popping the leftover of the cup around. I just, as I said, I always just struggle to get the pressure right when doing a swipe. I don't know what it is, but it's just something that I've got to practice and practice and practice. And I will be doing that over the quieter summer months, when after Christmas, once all that's all done, I've got some time to play. So we're just getting the pillow right to the edges now. This is what I should have done to start with. Like, I did a lot of, there's, 5 minutes of me fluffing with a pillow that I could have just spread out, popped on properly to start with, and would have saved a heck of a lot of time. But there we go. So we're just getting the pillow sorted. I don't know if you can still see, but there is actually the main pillow there in the mound. In the center, there's a little mound, which now my hands are going through. Oh my gosh, this is actually quite funny. This is hilarious. It's really funny to sit here and record your voiceover on a video that you haven't actually watched for a while and you've actually forgotten how bad it is. But anyway, this is real. This is the real life of acrylic painting and fluid art. It's sometimes things just don't go as smoothly as you want them to. So I'm just doing a lot of fluffing with my hands. I love getting in with my hands. You know, yes, you can use a tool and you can easily use a tool to spread your paint around. Absolutely not an issue. I just don't mind getting my hands dirty. So I'm just going around the edges. I've taped the sides of my edges halfway so that there's going to be a nice rim on my board. Unfortunately, I didn't video the taping process, so I do apologize for that. But if you go and look at my straight lines video, it gives you the same idea of what I've done here. But yeah, so now hopefully we're getting into the nitty gritty now of the good stuff. If not, I'm gonna just jump ahead until we do, so that I'm not wasting another 5 minutes of me fluffing around trying to work out what I'm doing. It just looks like now I'm about to change my gloves. And if I remember rightly, this is going to, just going to drop everything in my canvas. No worries. Oh, this is like a disaster. So I think I'm going to do this as a reverse swipe. So basically what that is, or I think Lisa Marvin calls it the loaded pallet swipe. I like to call it a reverse swipe. Same technique, just different name. Where you load your swiping tool up first with your cell activator. So you're basically doing everything in reverse. So I'm putting my white cell activator now on my palette knife, on my palette tool from Fluid Art Co. that I'm using there. So we're just covering that up there now with the, excuse me, I'm going to go, pardon me, with the white cell activator. So we're just making sure there's a good covering of cell activator there. And then basically you layer your colors in the reverse order as if you were layering it for a bloom. So whatever I want at the bottom goes on last. Whatever I want at the top goes on first. So this is abalone. So I'm putting abalone on first and I'm just squiggling it around. Abalone, I have since discovered, has got these beautiful, it's a beautiful light blue, but with some beautiful gold through it. And I've resined this piece and oh my gosh, the abalone just shines. And I cannot wait to show you that in the end of this video when the resin, like how it just makes it pop. Now I'm just popping I think it's an aquary blue. I'll have to go back. The colors will be listed. I always forget what the colors are that I paint with when I'm painting. But this is just blues. So then this will be a phthalo blue, I think, or is it cerulean blue? I'll have to go back and look. But it's just a few blues with the abalone and the white cell activator, because I feel like sometimes just keeping the colors simple really actually enables sometimes these beautiful colors just to shine on their own rather than adding too much other stuff in. I'm just keeping this palette really simple and easy. So that's it. White cell activator, abalone, a turquoise blue, and the phthalo or cerulean blue. So this was the plan. This was meant to be my swipe. So it was meant to go all the way around so that I could spin it out and it would just look beautiful. Whether I didn't load enough paint, whether I didn't put enough pressure, it's all right. It's irrelevant now because what I ended up creating is beautiful. When this is how it started to how it ends, it's a really different piece of art. This is where I start to improvise and start to play with it. What you can't see here now because of the angle of the camera is in that middle part there are some beautiful cells forming, but I'm just going to repeat the palette swipe. So I'm just going to reload the palette and just do a few more swipes. And then I think eventually I will get some smaller tools, smaller swipe tools out and do some smaller sections as well. Sometimes when you're doing this, it's really difficult to know when to stop. So, and I think that's what I struggle with a lot with this, is how much empty space to leave and how much colour to put on it, and where do I fix, or what do I swipe over, what do I redo. It was interesting because I haven't really done something like this before. I haven't really manipulated and played with something so much as I did with this piece, but I'm so glad I stuck with it. So if you ever have a piece that you're not happy with, I just want to encourage you to play around with it before you remove it, before you get rid of it. Just play with it, because you never know what the final piece might actually be. So we're just preparing this next palette. We're just popping in the last colour there, and we're going to pop it over and we're going to swipe it on again. I think I'm going into the white area that's in front of me. So we just swipe it down and around the edges. And I think my plan was, with this particular swipe, was that would fix the problem. And then I'd be able to spin it. It would spin out and it would look amazing. But again, it hasn't happened. If this was my final piece, oh my gosh, it would be a disaster zone. So I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Where do I go? How do I fix this? Do I spin it? Do I not spin it? I'm like debating about it. Do I get a smaller swipe tool and just play with it a little bit? So now what I'm doing is I'm just swiping some areas with the tool, with the small little, it's like a small little oval tool. And I'm just trying to manipulate some areas to see what I want. Now, there is a whole heap of white space. Now, I'm not afraid of dead space, but I really want to fill that area in because I do feel like it stands out like a sore thumb. So on this very small tool, I'm redoing exactly the same again. So putting my white cell activator down, putting my abalone, putting my light turquoise or cyan or teal or whatever that color is, and then putting my darker blue in. So every time I swipe, regardless of the tool that I'm actually using, I am loading the colors exactly the same. And so now we're just going to go into this small area and see, tiny little swipe. And that's pretty much what I do for the next few minutes, is I do lots of small little swipes. And now I'm just going to drag it back the other way and see what happens. Just to fill in this gap and just make this piece of art flow. And just give it more character, more definition. Yeah, so again, same swipe tool again. We're just loading her up with some colors, and then we'll go and play again with the next area that we're going to play with. As you can see with the bottom part that's facing us near the colors right now, there's some really nice big cells coming through here. And we just swipe again. So I'm trying not to swipe in a circle. I don't want to swipe all the way around. With doing these little swipes, I'm just wanting to make it flow, fill some gaps, give it a bit more character and a bit more color. You'll see with that last one I did, there's still quite a bit of cell activator on there. What you've also got to remember with cell activator and cells is they do develop over time. So just because you've got a blob of white doesn't mean it's not going to develop cells. Just let it sit there and see what happens. As you can see with that part that I've just spun to the top, there's some really beautiful cells coming through there. And I think I'm afraid that if I spin it, I'm going to lose those. But we're just going to keep doing some multiple palette swipes and see how she rolls, pretty much. I can't remember how long this video goes for, to be honest, because I don't know if you want me to keep yakking on about the same process over and over again. So I think what we might do is we might just make me shut up. I will put some music on and you can watch me play around with this, fixing up some swipe areas, fixing up some areas that the cells haven't come in. I might even do a couple little small scoop and drags, and that's basically where you put your swiping tool under the paint, you pick it up and you just drag it out. And that whole idea is just to drag those cells that you've created and making them a little bit bigger, spacing them out without warping them. So there's a few of those sort of things that we certainly can do, but I'm going to whack on some music, make my voice shut up, and let you watch the finishing process. Right, so as you can see, we've done a lot of swiping and a lot of playing, a couple of blows here and there, and this is kind of where we're at. We're heading towards the end. So I think now I'm just going to get it ready to do a couple of spins. It's always really important to spin your paint or to move your paint because you don't want to leave thick, chunky paint or thick parts of paint on your canvas or whatever your image is that you're like your tool that you're creating on. So for this, a Lazy Susan, because if it's uneven or if it's too thick, it will dry clumpy, unevenly, and potentially leave cracks. So I'm going to give it a couple of spins, which is why I've covered up my area. I've just laid down some puppy pads to protect the areas around. Because obviously when you spin, especially a Lazy Susan, the paint can fly. You can end up with paint everywhere. I've ended up with a nice straight line of paint across my apron from spinning when I've had a lot of paint on the surface. So we're just giving it, lucky that moved, nearly went flying there. So I'm just giving it some gentle spins. This particular Lazy Susan is not a massive like speed spinner, which is great. But it does need a little bit of work to get it spinning. So it's, as you can see, it's just a slow spinner, which is great, but it's also not great because it needing a little bit more force puts the risk of it going flying. So I've got to be careful, but I also need a bit of speed to actually get the paint to move. I also don't want to have too much speed because I don't want to lose some of those amazing cells that I've actually got sitting on this piece. I was taught by Nikki D Art at the Brisbane Live that a great way to tell your thickness is by dipping a little stick or a tool in there, and it should really only be like 2, maybe 3 mil thickness. And then you know that you've spun enough, and then that way you know it's going to dry evenly. When I first started fluid arting and acrylic pouring, I didn't know this, and so my first few pieces were quite thick and chunky when they were drying. So I did end up with lots of pieces that have certainly cracked, or certainly did crack. Whereas now I've learnt my lesson. I know I need to spin. Now, like in this, if I was spinning and I was losing a lot of my amazing design over the edges, then what I would probably do is start tilting to try and bring some of that design back into the center and try and not lose it. The problem with a Lazy Susan, it's really hard because when you tilt one way, you lose the other side. So by spinning, it tries and makes it occur evenly. But you just got to look at your design and go, right, is that enough? Am I like, if you have to risk losing some of it, you have to risk losing some of it, because the last thing you want to do is spend all this time creating this amazing piece of work and then it dries and it's just ruined the way it's dried. So you've just, it's, oh, I don't know what the answer is. Excuse me, I'm yawning here. Sorry. I don't know what the answer is. It's a bit of guesswork. It is a bit of taking a chance. But you've got to make sure that you do it, because you, as I said, you just don't want to get to the end and go, oh my gosh, there's this massive big crack in the paint and it's just looking crap. But I think we're now at the point where I'm happy with the design. I'm just going through now and picking out a couple of dregs or popping a couple of bubbles that might be there. But this is pretty much the end. I am happy. It's gotten to a point where, yep, we're good. So I'm going to pop it aside now. We're going to let it cure, and then we're going to come back and we're going to go through the resin process. So we'll see you in a second. So here we are 3-4 weeks later, and I'm ready to resin my board. So what you don't see, and I'm sorry I haven't shown you this, is I have taped the back of the board to protect it from the resin. And I have already mixed up my resin. Please go back and have a look at a couple of my straight lines video. I think in that one I've got how I mix my resin. But what I've also added into this resin is a little bit of sparkly pigment, which is going to just add to the abalone and make this baby pop. So basically I'm just pouring the resin on. With my Lazy Susans, I actually do like to use sometimes a little bit more. I haven't put enough on, but I really like to use a good amount of resin because I feel like these need a bit more extra protection. And I'm a resiner that uses my hands. I get my hands in there. I massage it into all the surfaces and all the paint because I want it to sink into everything, and I want the paint and the resin to attach to each other. By doing that with my hands rather than a stick, I actually can feel it. So then I can actually work out and know that everywhere it has resin, so that when it dries and starts to cure, it doesn't pull apart from some areas like it can happen sometimes. So I find that by using my hands, I get to actually make sure every part has a bit of resin. Now, I didn't show it in this video, but the other important step in this process is after I've taped up the back of the board, or in this case the Lazy Susan, it's really important then to clean your surface with some isopropyl alcohol. People use other things. I love isopropyl alcohol. I put a pair of gloves on, I spray my cloth and I wipe over it, and that just clears any oils, anything that might detract the resin from. And that's another process it's important to do to make sure you get a really good coating of resin, because there is, again, nothing worse than going through all of this work with your resin and then coming back the next morning or the next day and finding that there's a point or two on your piece that the resin has unattracted from, or separated from is a better word. And that happened a lot again when I started, and I've certainly learned that. And that's why I just put gloves on and I just get in and get dirty with it. Because I find just doing this step for me personally just make sure that everywhere has my resin on it. So we're just going over, we're just making sure it's nice and smooth. We're checking the edges to make sure there's resin right around the edges. And I think I'm pretty happy where we're at now. So usually then what I do is, once I'm happy with the surface, is I will take my gloves off, run the heat gun. So I get a heat gun first and go over that with the surface. So here we are about to take my gloves off. So I probably should be getting my heat gun out now. I haven't spent a fortune. My heat gun's not that expensive and it does the job very well. And so we just turn it on the low setting and we just smudge that over the surface, and that just softens the resin, pops any big air bubbles, and makes the resin a little bit able to be manipulated. And then I usually will get a stick out, or a toothpick, or a skewer, and I like to go through and make sure that I'm picking out any dregs that have fallen, even though we, try and keep our area, and I've got a purifier, but I then will go through and pick out any dregs and make sure that there's nothing sitting in there that's going to then need a second or third coat, because that does happen sometimes. I don't know where I've gone. Where have I disappeared to? Can anyone see me? Oh, there we go. There's a hand in the corner. Oh, we're back. Excellent. So hopefully now I'm getting my heat gun out. Yep, perfect. Heat gun is out. And we're just going to run it over the surface. And again, it's just going over everywhere very quickly. You don't want to leave it sitting in a spot for too long because you will burn it. So just nice and quick. And then I'll get my little stick and we'll just go through and make sure there's nothing in there that shouldn't be. Yes, as I said, I have my purifier, but things still do fall. Micro little dregs, what I call dregs, do fall in, and sometimes there's bubbles. So I will go through and pop those. So that's this process now. It does take a bit. I think on here I had a few bubbles, and that's the Lazy Susan. And the way the Lazy Susan is, I sometimes find I have to do a couple of coats of resin on my Lazy Susans just because of the timber that is used, or the wood that's used to create the Lazy Susan, the way they're prepared. I do prepare my boards, I do prime them, but sometimes that's not enough. Actually, did I prime? I don't think I primed this one. No, I remember from the start of the video, I actually didn't prime this. But sometimes I usually will prime them and prepare the surfaces, because if you don't, then I tend to find the wood does interact with the paint, which then interacts with the resin. So preparing it is also a little important step. It sometimes will save you having to apply that second coat of resin. And having to apply multiple coats of resin, A, it's time, and B, it's money, because resin's not cheap. When I was doing this, I realized that I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't got much resin left. So I'm going to have to go, spend another $500 and order some more resin, because after Christmas, I'm probably not going to have any, once I finished all my Christmas stock. So, yoo-hoo, she says. More money. But that's okay. That's what we do. It's just part of the process. So now what I'm doing is I have a blowtorch. So I've got it on a low setting, and I'm just going over every surface. And again, it's a couple of seconds. Not even a second, actually, on each area. And that's just popping all the micro bubbles. It's really cool to watch, especially on a black canvas, is watching those micro bubbles pop. This is the last step of the resin process. Well, this part of the resin process is popping those micro bubbles and watching that happen. And I'll just do a last minute check before I go, pop her on the shelf and let her cure. And all resin takes about 28 days, 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks to cure, depending on your temperature and your humidity. And it's really important to allow that to happen, because if you don't, it potentially allows that surface to become damaged from something that gets used for. So I wouldn't want to be selling this until it's cured, in case someone pops a knife on it and ends up with a knife mark. Again, that's not fair for the client, or the customer that purchases it. It's not fair for this beautiful piece of artwork that you've created. So it's important to follow all the steps, follow all the instructions, because the last thing you want to do is sell a product to somebody and they come back within a week and say, I'm sorry, but I used it and now it's got knife marks all through it. Yes, I can fix the knife marks. I'll just sand the board back a little bit, the resin back a bit, and give it another coat. But that's not the point. So take the time with your creations, and you'll end up with a great product. So here we are with the finished Lazy Susan. You just wait till you see the abalone just shine and the shimmer on this baby. It is just beautiful. I really hope you've enjoyed watching the creation of this beautiful masterpiece. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I will reply to all your comments, and have an absolutely amazing day. Until next time.